right, so I get the question a lot. What is the link to tearing the UCL, like the biomechanical link? And it's what's called supination. So basically, when the arm's up, so like your arm's up and the thumb is back, so here on the skeleton, the thumb is back, you can see the ulnar and the radial bone are separated, right? And when they're separated, this joint, the elbow joint, is a hinge joint. It's only built to go back and forth. When it's separated, there's more movement left to right in a lateral movement, right? So the concept is if I cross these or pronate, I turn the thumb inward, then these bones cross. See them cross? And think of a towel like tightening. And think of all the musculature going around your arm as you're doing that, right? It's going to tighten this up. So now you're going to have more stability. So that's the key here. When we're in supination back here, and if we're back here accelerating forward, we're spreading the gap. So if you hear terms like spreading the gap, that's spreading this gap right here. This gap is where the UCL, the tissue is, that when it spreads hard, it rips, and then you have real instability, which causes velocity and command issues, which leads to Tommy John surgery. So supination is the problem. Now, there's been many coaches and many methods that have tried to prevent loading and supination, okay? So what they do is they pronate. Dr. Mike Marshall was the first to really do this. And he wanted to keep you, as a pitcher, in pronation, so this is supination, in pronation. Notice this is not how most people throw. They throw like this, right? They pronate after release, not before. He was trying to put you in pronation all the time. And to do that, he would teach you to throw like a cricket bowler, right? Big arm swings, because lay back is where it's hard to lay back when you're pronated. So it really pretty much kills layback. So he was trying to get the arm velocity out of a full pendulum swing like a cricket bowler. The problem is the layback, which allows the trunk to go forward and create a lot of energy. When you kill layback through pronation early, you kill velocity. Your velocity just tanks. And it'd be impossible to compete today with a pendulum swing in a pronated position like a cricket bowler. Your arm would be very healthy for two reasons. It would be in pronation, which is a more stable position for the forearm, and it would throw slower, which throwing speeds destroys the ligaments. You hear other methods say to kind of follow with the Dr. Marshall is to avoid the layback or external rotation supination would be to go up, right? Which is similar to the pendulum swing. To go up, even though you're still in supination, but to go up. So to go back and up, and what happens is you start leading with the elbow. So now, when the arm's being pulled back the hardest, the olecranon is pointing towards the target. So that's going to do more like this. So basically, when the arm is up, okay, when it's up, instead of laying back like this, it's going to be like this, laying back like this. So it's not really layback, it's flexion. So you're right, that's not going to put you in a position to where you can create the valgus stress. It's going to be more in flexion. Here's the negative though. There's two negatives. One of the negatives is when you go to release, you're going to slam the olecranon. So here's the olecranon. When you go from this point where you're leading with the elbow and you're laying back in flexion, when you go to release, you're going to slam the olecranon into the epicondyle of the humerus. This. Boom. And this is a problem because people do this. You see a lot of people pushing the elbow before going to release. And the things that happen is the tip of the olecranon will break off. This will break off. I've also seen injuries where this broke off in that movement. So now you're risking the health of this bone, which once this breaks off, you're in real trouble because it's such a small bone. They have to take a screw and drill right through there to put it back on. And a lot of times they don't drill it perfectly and that screw's popping up here or popping down there, and then you indefinitely throw with pain. So that is a negative of going from flexion to extension. The other negative is the shoulder. So I'm going up, right? I'm going up. Yeah, I'm getting the elbow to a position where I'm not in the layback, but I'm risking the olecranon break. Here's the thing in the shoulder. Now that I'm so high, I'm impinging the shoulder. So the shoulder is built to when the arm comes up and lays back, it has to roll. See, the ball has to roll in the socket. So it rolls pretty healthy there. When we start going up here, specifically if your scaps aren't strong, you're here and then you're rolling. So I can barely do it. See, we're rolling there, and that's called impingement. So if you've ever heard that, you're at higher risk of impingement the more you bring the elbow up, okay? So now the risk is impingement. And when we get impingements and we start rolling with impingements, we start doing rotator cuff damage. We start tearing the supraspinatus. We start creating slap tears. We start creating posterior, anterior tears. We start tearing all of this up. And to me, I'll take a damaged elbow before a damaged shoulder. I mean, I don't want either, but I would take a damaged elbow to damaged shoulder because a Tommy John reconstruction is way more common and way such a better recovery statistic than the shoulder. The shoulder is really almost the kiss of death. That's what happened to me. I tore my rotator cuff at 18 years old because of that, because I was this kid doing this, right? So that's the negative if you're gonna take that arm path to try to avoid supinated layback. You're gonna push your elbow forward and you're gonna go elbow up. Now you're gonna be risking impingements and olecranon stress by slamming your olecranon. What's the perfect path? No path is gonna be perfect because we have to go into supination. Meaning if Marshall figured out the only way to possibly never go into supination, the problem is performance suffered. So we can't do that. Kids want to play at the highest level where velocities are the highest. So we're going to have to go into layback. So what's the healthiest way to go in layback? Here's the healthiest way to go into layback. When your arm, so I'm going to show it this way first, then I'll show you with the skeleton. When you bring the arm back, right, we have to bring it back to create some room for trunk rotation. Then we have to bring it up, so the next movement it's going to go in layback to allow room for more forward trunk tilt. The key is going to be pull it back, bring it in full cocking before rotation, and as we go in rotation, this elbow needs to follow my trunk. Because if the elbow stays back and we drag, that's going to delay pronation. So we're going to be in the eccentrically loaded supinated position longer, which is going to hold more stress in where the gap's the biggest. We don't want that. So that's really the worst thing we can do is drag it back here. That's why I talk about it all the time. Also, when it stays in sync here, it's going to allow us to more quickly get into pronation. That's the key here. The key is how fast can we get into pronation, right? So I'm laying back supinated, bones apart. I want to, as quick as possible, get this thumb over and get pronated into my release so I can get stability in that elbow. So I'm trying to, as I come around, as quick as possible, get this internally rotated, this thumb coming around as fast as I possibly can so I can create stability in that elbow and get it out of that eccentrically loaded, widening of the gap position. So that's why it has to stay with my trunk, and my trunk has to peek forward. If my trunk keeps pulling off, I stay in the drag, I stay in the eccentrically loaded position of supination longer, I keep doing the damage. So I have to make sure after landing in separation, as I go into rotation, my arm lays back and it's staying in sync so it's not dragging, I have to peek trunk forward so I quickly turn over into pronation and I create pronation acceleration, which gives us another performance variable, which is ball spin. How quickly I do this is going to increase how fast the ball spins. Not only that, it's going to support my velocity. And two, if my trunk is pushing forward, I'm pushing more energy through my body, kinetic energy through my body to the target, so my arm doesn't have to create it. If I'm going this way, my arm's going to have to create and add more energy towards the target because I'm flying off to the target. So the key is to separate. When you go into rotation, the elbow sinks up at the trunk. And when you get into supination, you're ready to push your trunk forward to flip it over into internal rotation pronation to stabilize that elbow joint, get it out of the eccentrically loaded supinated stress. And by far, there's no other way, guys. If you go up, shoulder impingements. If you go forward, olecranon fractures. If you go down, even more widening of the gap, even more delay in pronation. If you go rotation, you fly out, even longer to get to pronation. There's only one way, and that way is to keep your elbow and shoulder in sync and peek your trunk forward to accelerate pronation earlier in your movement. So this is why I invented the trunk accelerator, mainly because it doesn't allow these bad arm paths that lead to arm injury. For example, what was the first arm path? It's the dragging arm. I can't do that because it's in this holster and it's gonna move with my trunk. I can't pull it out of this position. So now I'm forced to keep my elbow and shoulder moving together. All right, so that's gonna prevent the drag that delays pronation, right? The other thing is, what's the other one? I can't push my elbow forward. It's in the holster. I can't push my elbow forward. So I'm gonna prevent the olecranon stress of pushing the olecranon fracture. The other thing, if I'm gonna go up, I've gotta lean. So I'm still in the line with the shoulder. My elbow's in line with the shoulder. I'm not gonna lift up and push out because I'm not gonna be able to move it well. I'm not gonna be able to throw well if I do that. It's holstering and holding it in by also putting my scaps back and retracted. The other thing is if I try to over-rotate my trunk, which we know can create the fly out, and if I over-rotate my trunk, two things will happen. The ball might fly that way, or I'll over-rotate and then the ball will shoot over here, so I won't even throw the ball straight. The only way to throw the ball straight with this is to delay your trunk into landing and then carry your trunk open and forward so the arm can actually extend and until you rotate. And the only movement we're allowing is layback to supination, pronation, right? External rotation, supination, internal rotation, pronation. The only way I'm gonna throw strike is if I quickly internally rotate and pronate because my trunk can only go forward. If it tries to keep going off, I'm not gonna throw a strike. So with the trunk accelerator, there's no way. I mean, there's a possibility, but it's very hard to get into these arm paths that cause the injury. The UCL injury, even the shoulder injury. And it will start to teach you how to move most efficiently to keep your arm healthy, to teach you command, to teach you velocity. It all comes together because there's a goal to only do this one way, and that's the healthiest way possible.